What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, we are covering the college football playoffs. This is going to be our college football playoff preview and picks episode. We are going to break down in depth these two games, biggest two games in the sport this year. So this is going to have its own episode to highlight the college football playoffs. So pumped for these semifinal games, Daniel, and excited to break down the Fiesta Bowl and the Peach Bowl.
Yeah, this will be great. This is what we're here for. You always talk about the build up to this, the playoff. These four teams made it. They have an opportunity to win the national championship, and it starts right here with these semifinal games, and they'll be played on New Year's Eve. So we'll get our taste of that this weekend.
Daniel, let's start with the Fiesta Bowl here. So Michigan and TCU. Michigan is a 7.5-point favorite against the Horned Frogs. Michigan 13-0, win the Big Ten in back-to-back seasons, beat Ohio State in back-to-back seasons. So they come in just on a high into this game. What a season after going, 12-1 last year in the regular season. To come off of that, lose draft picks like they did, to have Harbaugh flirt with the NFL like he did. They go undefeated. They come in into this game undefeated, the number 2 seed in the playoff. TCU, undefeated regular season, so 12-0. They lost to a team in the Big 12 championship that they beat in the regular season, but nonetheless, the playoff committee did what they should have done. TCU had already earned their way there, and now they're 7.5-point dogs, but that's not new to TCU. TCU's kind of been in this place all season of being underdogs in several games, and all they did was win. I want to start here, Daniel. How does TCU win this game? If TCU were to win, how do you see that going down?
I think TCU has a narrow path to victory, but they have a path. That is with it's largely based on shot plays to Quentin Johnson, Max Duggan using his legs, getting outside the pocket, causing issues for Michigan's defense. I think that if he's able to create with his legs a little bit, use that to get first downs, keep them ahead of the change, and then hit shot plays to, the great wide receivers that they have, and who I think is probably going to be the number 1 receiver taken in the draft, Quentin Johnson. I think that's the way they do this. Defensively, it's all about red zone because they're going to give up yards to Michigan. Michigan's just bigger, stronger, faster, really on both sides of the ball. The trenches is where Michigan will excel in this game. So that's why Max Duggan will need to be mobile. As he's a mobile guy. He'll need to move the pocket, and they'll need to, like I said, defensively, they're going to, you hate to count on turnovers. They're going to have some go their way, I think, steal a possession or two, but ultimately keep Michigan out of the end zone, because I do think that they're going to be moving the ball between the 20s regularly. So when TCU has the ball, hit those big explosives, and then even if they give up big explosives on the other side, don't let them cash in the red zone.
So for me, I looked at two main reasons here, and going along the same lines as you. So one, defensively, TCU stacked the box, load the box up. I went back and watched Michigan's worst performance of the season. Obviously, they did not have a loss in the schedule, but the Illinois game where Michigan had to win on the final play of the game on a field goal, Illinois had 6 to 8 guys in the box consistently throughout that entire game. And Ohio State did the same thing. Michigan hit on 3 plays in that game, and it worked. In the Illinois game, it didn't work. And Illinois held Michigan to just 0.3 EPA per play, which is in the 10th percentile, 10th being bad, 90th being good in that sense. Michigan's offense thrives when it runs the ball well, and they will try to establish the run. Illinois is also able to get 7 tackles for loss in that game, 5 on running plays, 2 on passing plays, so 2 sacks in that game. So Michigan will, like I said, they're going to commit to run. They rank 115th in the country and run rate over expected. So like they run the ball more than almost anybody else in the country. So if I'm TCU on defense, I'm stacking the box. In that same game, McCarthy did not beat Illinois with his arm. He was just held to 6.1 yards per attempt. So stack the box, dare McCarthy to throw, and see if he can get the ball out quickly and consistently throughout the whole game. Two, on offense, do what you've kind of done all year. Take what the defense gives you. Oklahoma was TCU's best performance. In that game, they had 307 passing yards and 371 rushing yards. Now, that's a lot. That was a perfect game against Oklahoma, but TCU at their best has a very balanced attack on offense. When Michigan drops into cover two, you got to hit the explosive runs. Max Duggan, like you said, has to be involved in the run game for them to be successful. And if they stack the box, trust that you've got guys like, oh my gosh, Quentin Johnson. Almost said,
oh yeah,
Jenkins for some reason. Ole Miss running back. I was like, wait, that's not right. Quentin Johnson to win one-on-one whenever they do stack the box. So I think that's how TCU wins the game. Let's switch gears. How does Michigan win this game?
Yeah, this one, there's a lot more paths to victory. Michigan has a counterpunch if if their main one's not working. I think that you look at what they do well. Obviously, you mentioned running the ball. This Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. Is this the second year in a row they've won it?
They're the first school to ever win back-to-back.
Yeah, so it's not by mistake. They are a good offensive line. They're a great offensive line. They should be able to move TCU's defensive line at will. And that's why I said when discussing TCU, I think that regardless of what happens, I think that between the 20s, Michigan's going to be able to move the ball regardless because they're going to be able to run the ball really well. And I think they're going to be able to hit some plays in the pass game. McCarthy's legs becomes big when you start to get in that red zone area because running the ball is extremely important in the red zone to be able to convert for touchdowns. I think that Michigan's going to do that. Donovan Edwards, it's crazy that they've had to replace Blake Corum, who is arguably their best player, and Donovan Edwards has not missed a beat. I think that the tandem of him and JJ McCarthy is going to be lethal. I do think that they're going to cash in on their drives. I think that every drive, I think you're going to look back at this drive chart from them, and there's going to be very few that they didn't at least end in field goal range. So I think it's important to stack points up, but I also think it's important you have to convert these for touchdowns. They have to convert these opportunities for touchdowns. Defensively, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to contain this passing attack. This rushing attack, too, you mentioned it. I mean, Kendry Miller, 1,300 yards on the ground this year. I mean, they're a very balanced, explosive offense. It's not just one aspect that gets you. That's what, Sonny Dykes does well. He knows that you need both. You can't be one-dimensional and be this good. So, obviously, that's why they're here. TCU's offense, TCU's offense is the reason TCU is where they are right now. So they're very, very good. They're very explosive. Michigan, their defense is so much better than TCU's defense that, I think that it's easy for me to see Michigan basically just not giving up as many points as TCU. TCU's offense is better than Michigan's offense. That's what I'm trying to say. TCU might have the best unit on the field altogether with their offense, but 2 and 3 are Michigan in that defense and then offense, and then a large gap to TCU's defense. So I think that the accumulation of the complementary football that Michigan plays is really going to lend itself to better field position for Michigan when they start, a rested defense that's ready to get after it. Because what comes with these big explosive plays that TCU is going to have potentially is the defense for Michigan is not going to be on the field very long. So at the end of the game, they're going to be fresh. They're going to be able to get their pass rush after Max Duggan. So I think that there's, they say there's more than one way to skin a cat. I think that there's several ways Michigan can win this game. I think they've got like the most options for paths to victory. If TCU does this, Michigan can counter with this, and vice versa. But I'd be interested to see if Michigan doesn't just come out and try to control this one from the jump because they are way more physical.
So 2 points again for me. Number one, run the dang ball. That's how Michigan wins. Run the dang ball. Yeah, sure, Michigan runs it way more often than other teams do. But that's because they're good at it. Like that is their strength. Run the dang ball. Kansas State was able to move the ball extremely well on the ground against TCU in that Big 12 championship. Michigan ranks 7th in the country and success rate while running the ball. So just do what you've done well all year. Run the dang ball. Run first with your offense. Lean on that run game. Control the clock. Control the game. On defense, win on early downs. Win on first and second down. Michigan's defense is 2nd in the country in early downs EPA. So EPA allowed on first and second down. Now TCU, top 15 in the country in that same category. So again, for Michigan to win this game, win on early downs, get TCU into 3rd and long, and then trust that your defensive line is going to get pressured. Then you can drop back into coverage, play a ton of zone, and not let your corners be 1-on-1 with TCU's receivers. And so that's how I think Michigan wins this game. Run the ball, win on first and second down on defense. Daniel, we talked how both teams can win. Give me your pick. Give me your prediction. How does this game play out? And how about a score?
Yeah. I think TCU is going to hit some plays in this game. I mean, they're going to be in it. I'm a strong lean to Michigan. If that people, if you couldn't already tell, just based on what my expectations are of how this game plays out, I think Michigan gets to play their style of game, but TCU, I think they score 3 touchdowns. So I'm kind of leaning like 45-21. I think Michigan continues to pile it on. At the end, I think that maybe the last 2 touchdowns are just these like long marches. I think TCU scores mostly in the first half. I think they scored 2 touchdowns in the first half and then 1 touchdown maybe after halftime. So I just think that kind of feel that there's some sort of juice going into halftime, and then I think Michigan's going to kind of take the air out of the ball. Second half, really impose their will. I think that the 1 through 22, on each side can play. Michigan TCU can play with Michigan. It's where you start to see that talent difference on their depth chart. Like 1 to 85, Michigan's just got so much more talent for the scholarship players. So I think you'll start to see the rotation coming into play. I think you'll see that offensive line leaning on them over the course of the game, and eventually that dam's going to break. So yeah, give me Michigan to win and cover. And like I said, 45-21, that's kind of my gut.
So you mentioned it. There's one team in this game that is far more talented, deeper, and far more physical, and that's Michigan. TCU's had a great season. They deserve to be here, but this is a really bad matchup for TCU. I just don't see how they keep it close to Michigan, to be honest. And I'll throw like a stat prediction out there. I think Michigan runs for over 200 yards. And if Michigan's running the ball for over 200 yards, I'd put a lot. Josh Pate talks about a padlock stat. Like if I can show you the stat ahead of time to kind of show you how the game's going to go. If you're showing me Michigan's running for over 200, I'm laying a lot of money that Michigan's covering the spread as well. So I'm with you. I think Michigan wins, beats TCU, books their spot to the national championship. Michigan 34, TCU 23. So I'm not quite as lopsided as you, but still north of 10 points. So I think Michigan shuts it down though. Like it's one of these like you're controlling the whole game, and they just keep running the ball, and that clock's just going to run. So I think Michigan could score more. I just think the style at which they're going to beat TCU is going to dictate a lower scoring game. So I'd also lean heavily to the under in this game as well. Over unders they get 59 ish. So my score is right at 57. I think it could be lower scoring than that though as well. I will mention in the history of the playoff in this first round, the 2 and 3 seed game is at 500 as far as how often the 2 seed wins versus the 3 seed. So the 2 seed is 4-4, as is the 3 seed. Daniel, how many 3 seeds have won the national championship? Trivia question for you.
So let's see here. I mean, Georgia won last year. They were the 3 seed.
That was the only one.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
I was trying to think through. It's been,
last year it was the curse until last year that the 3 seed had never won.
Because the 4 seed won the second year. That was Ohio State.
So that was the first year of the playoff. Let's get into it. Peach Bowl. The 1 seed is 6-2 in the semifinal. The 4 seed is 2-6. But both 4 seeds that won the first round also won the national championship. So Alabama and Ohio State being one of them. Georgia, a 6.5 point favorite against Ohio State. Georgia comes in 13-0. They do what they didn't do last year, which is win the SEC. So they come in as the 1 seed into this year's college football playoff. The defending national champions looking to go back to back, look to be the first team to do that since Alabama in 2011, 2012. Ohio State back in the playoff after not being in it last year. They sneak in that 4 seed, only loss being to Michigan in the regular season at home. They've had a lot of time to work on the issues that they experienced in that game. And Daniel, this is a matchup I'm extremely excited for because this is the 2 most talented teams in the playoff. And looking at power ratings, most power ratings still have Ohio State power rated as the 2nd best team in the country. So you're getting in a lot of power ratings, the number 1 versus number 2 power rated teams in the country in this semifinal matchup. So this is a fun one. I think this is the game most people are looking more forward to watching of the 2 games. Tell me this, Daniel. Ohio State's the underdog. How does Ohio State beat Georgia?
And this was your pick for the national championship game, was Ohio State versus Georgia at the beginning of the year. So there's a lot clearer path to see Ohio State as the underdog than to see TCU as the underdog to win. Ohio State, part of that, a lot of that is their defensive talent. Have they lived up to it this year so far? I mean, there's been some games where they have, some games where they haven't. They have not been consistent on the defensive side, but that's not to say they've been bad necessarily. I do think that they have some individual elite players. Obviously, JT Tuimoloau. I mean, he might be the number 1 pick next year in the NFL draft. I would actually probably put money on that because he is that kind of a freak, that kind of player coming from a pedigree of Ohio State where they've had the Bosa bros, Chase Young, et cetera, et cetera. That being said, so defensively, I think they have several individual good players. I think that they struggle in some areas, but if they get some turnovers and they get after Stetson Bennett, who largely has not had to be under duress, Georgia has a very good offensive line. They've sustained a couple injuries, but they're so deep. They're the deepest offensive line out there. I think if they can have some havoc plays defensively, if Ohio State can have some havoc plays, get them behind the change and, really force Stetson to beat them down the field and not just short to intermediate, but like more of an intermediate to long range passing game. I think that bodes well for them defensively. I think Georgia still hits some of those. Don't get me wrong. I just think that you increase your chances of them not hitting as much. The the further they get back, long third downs, basically. So they got to win defensively on first and second down, big havoc plays, potentially some turnovers. Offensively, I mean, they're missing Jackson Smith and Jigba, which they've been in and out of having him all year. Their wide receiver room is still elite, even without him. But not having Travion Henderson's a big deal. And Mayan Williams is out too, is he not?
I think he's playing.
Okay.
I think he's playing.
Okay. Well, that's good if he's playing. I hope for their sake that he is, because he is a force running the ball. Ohio State's deep at running back, so they're going to have guys to be able to take carries, do their thing. This is about C.J. Stroud, Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Boka. Like, they're just going to be able to take the ball down the field. They've got a pretty good offensive line. Paris Johnson Jr. is going to be a top NFL draft pick. So they've got the talent everywhere to do it. C.J. Stroud's going to have to be threading a needle. Georgia has looked vulnerable at times against a really good passing attack. Obviously, it's tough to look at last year and then put that on this year's team because the defense had 8 players drafted off of the defense. But, for instance, the Alabama SEC championship game last year for Georgia, which is their last loss, that was a big explosive day. A lot of the same secondary is there. That was there for that day. Fast forward to, this SEC championship, Georgia versus LSU. LSU, who has a very similar skill set at the wide receiver position to Ohio State. They were able to put up yards and points with a couple of different quarterbacks. So I think C.J. Stroud's better than obviously both of those quarterbacks that were there that day. They put 30 points on Georgia's defense. Some of it was in garbage time, if you want to call it that, or, inconsequential game clock. But nonetheless, I think that that's the way Ohio State gets this done, is they block it up just enough. They take some shot plays to their receivers. They keep the chains moving, and they run the ball in the red zone. I do think that, we've referenced it a couple times on the show. C.J. Stroud, his legs have to be some sort of a factor in this game. If they can be able to get him some first downs, I think that bodes well for them to hang with Georgia. And if they hang with Georgia, they'll start to believe and they have enough talent. I think that they can win.
I think you read my notes here. My 2 main points. 1, win one-on-one battles on the outside. Georgia is going to have their corners, especially, be in one-on-one situations. Safeties too, but a Kirby Smart defense just leaves his defensive backs on islands and says you got to cover in certain spots. And Ohio State definitely has the wide receiver room to challenge those DBs. Malachi Starks, mighty talented. He's young. He got challenged in the LSU game. Keely Ringo got challenged in the LSU game. Like you mentioned, that LSU game, they threw for over 500 yards. Again, a lot of that being down 4 scores, but they still did it. And so I think if you're looking at ways to poke holes in the Georgia defense, this is one of them. Like, you've got talented enough receivers, even without Jackson Smith and Jigba, to challenge Georgia's defensive backs one-on-one, which you will have those opportunities. So you got to win those one-on-one battles. Ohio State ranks 4th in the country in EPA per pass and in passing success rate. So their passing offense is phenomenal. I think if you're winning in the passing game, you're doing exactly what you want to do if you're Ohio State. On the defensive side, make Stetson beat you with his arm. Like you mentioned, Bama did that last year in the SEC championship. Play a spy on Stetson Bennett. You've got athletic enough linebackers, like, have someone spy him so that he's not scrambling and getting those, it's 3rd and 2, your DBs play fine, and Stetson just scrambles and gets a first down. You got to win on those. So play a spy and Stetson, rush 4, and trust your talented defensive line to get pressure. Like you mentioned, JTT, you got talented guys on the defensive line. You got to get pressure with 4 and drop back. Make Georgia's receivers beat you. Make Stetson make decisions. Make him get to his 3rd and 4th read on plays. Make Stetson beat you with his arm. Play tight coverage inside. Leave your DBs one-on-one outside, I think, because if I'm Ohio State, I'm going to dare Stetson Bennett to throw it outside the numbers downfield. So play tight zones inside and make Stetson Bennett beat you outside the numbers. I think that's Ohio State's path to victory in this game. On the flip side, Georgia is favored by 6.5 points. How does Georgia win this game?
Yeah, it's similar to how we were talking about with Michigan versus TCU. There's more paths for Georgia because I think that they do more things well. I think Georgia's clearly been the number 1 team in the country this year, and it's for several reasons. But I think the depth, which becomes a bigger deal now because they've played so many guys this year, and now anyone who's on the roster actively playing is basically healthy because they've had 4 weeks to rest up and get better and get healthy. So I think for Georgia, you mentioned the receivers basically leaving them one-on-one. I think that's one of Georgia's main ways to attack this Ohio State defense because I think A.D. Mitchell coming back from an injury, Lad McConkey, who also was injured as well, both of them coming back, I think is huge. I think that they probably could be the biggest mismatch in the game. I was looking at a stat about the tight end usage and everything like that, and pass defense for Ohio State, they are actually one of the best in the nation at defending tight ends and running backs versus one of the worst in the nation at defending wide receivers. And Georgia tends to throw to their tight ends and running backs. So it's like strength on strength, which one's going to win. Georgia does have the best 2 tight ends in the country. I mean, they've definitely got the best tandem. I mean, the best collection of 2, but I mean, they do their own thing. Darnell Washington is just different. He's an offensive tackle that can run fast and catch the ball, and it's just really not fair. And then Brock Bowers has wide receiver speed. So I do think that you'll see that still manifest itself over the course of the game. They might not have their biggest days, but I don't think that you can completely take them away. But I think that Georgia, I think they're going to probably come out and just try to be physical and run the ball. If I had to guess, I think that's plan A. Come out, be physical, run the ball, throw play action to the tight ends and to the wideouts. I would be surprised though if Todd Monken doesn't have a script laid out for the wideouts to really get involved early. I look for that first drive, A.D. Mitchell to have a couple targets, maybe Lad McConkey to have a couple targets. I think it's important for them to somewhat force feed them the ball early because you can count on the running game. You can count on Brock Bowers and company to really take over this game if you need it. It's almost like they can hit that button and they know that, oh, yeah, hey, if this isn't working, we'll just go to our best player. And I don't know if that's Darnell Washington or Brock Bowers for what it's worth. They are both phenomenal players in their own right. Defensively, Georgia just has to do what they do. I mean, for what it's worth, I think that CJ Stroud will get him a little bit. I think that he's too good not to get him a little bit. That being said, I think that he's going to be tasting some turf over the course of the game. Georgia is not particularly a good pass rushing team, but I think that what Georgia is going to do is disguise enough, and they're going to have different guys coming. You'll see some exotic blitzes from the secondary, from the linebacker position. They've got enough defensive minds that I'm not really worried about that side of the ball on a large scale. Like I said, they're going to play complementary football. And if I'm going to give a score to it, at this point, I do think Georgia wins. I think it's by 2 touchdowns. So I have Georgia winning 41-27. So that's kind of I think Ohio State gets them a couple times, maybe early, but Georgia settles in. Georgia's been there before. Their championship pedigree. I just don't think that Ohio State's going to be able to get Stetson on the ground. And I think that's going to prove to be their demise ultimately, because he's going to be able to scramble around, find guys open, or pick up yards with his legs.
So 41-27, Georgia. So I talked about how I think Ohio State can win. Here's how I think Georgia can win. One, you kind of hit this. Take the restrictor plate off of Munkin. Georgia this year, when Munkin gets in his bag, this Georgia offense has looked unstoppable. You scored 49 against Oregon. You scored 50 against LSU. You scored 27 against Tennessee. Now, in that game, that was shut down at halftime. So, the rain kind of ruined that. Tennessee wasn't scoring. You kind of shut the offense down. But there's not a defense in the country that can cover Bowers and Washington. You can't cover them both. It's just Georgia has a freakish tight end room. And it's something no one else has and that no one else can simulate because of how different they are as players. And so if you're Georgia, you mentioned it in the LSU game, that first drive, I think they went 3 and out in the first drive in the SEC championship. Second drive, it was like Munkin just hit the Bowers button. And it was like 2 back-to-back passes of 10-plus yards to Brock Bowers. And it was just like, oh, yeah, we have this button. We can just hit whatever time they need to hit it. So Georgia's offense ranks 4th in the country in total offensive success rate, number 1 in passing success rate. So you're looking at, everyone says this is a physical offense that wants to run the ball first, but you're looking at the number 1 offense in success rate when passing the ball in the country at Georgia. 2 on defense, blitz, just blitz, because if I'm Georgia, can CJ Stroud beat us with his legs? And I don't, if he does, it'll be the first time he's done it this year. Mm-hmm. And so again, if I'm coaching Georgia, that's what I'm trusting, is that if he does it, it'll be the first time he does it. And I'm fine losing that battle like early, and we can make the adjustment if we need to, but blitz, because I do think the Ohio State wide receivers are talented enough to win those battles against Georgia's defensive backs. And so I want to get to CJ Stroud quickly and make him force balls or get him on the ground, run stunts, run simulated pressures. And I mean, quite honestly, this is Georgia we're talking about. Be Georgia on defense. That's how you win the game. Kirby Smart has earned that in his time at Georgia. They just got to be Georgia. As far as my pick and prediction, I was thinking a 60-minute game. I trust the team that's proven they're the most physical team in the country. They can bully you for 60 minutes, and that's Georgia. The last 2 Ohio State losses, they played teams with that mindset of just wanting to be physical, both to Michigan and then even to Oregon going back to last year. They played teams that want to bully you. And in a 60-minute game, Ohio State couldn't take it. So, I picked Ohio State to win the national championship beginning of the year. I do think Ohio State is going to hit some explosive plays against Georgia, but ultimately I think Georgia plays red zone roulette. Shout out Barton Simmons. I think they're okay blitzing and giving up some explosive plays and knowing that, hey, once you get inside the 20, we're just going to stop you from scoring. On the other side, I don't see how Ohio State's going to limit Georgia's offense if you couldn't limit Michigan's offense. I think Georgia has way more ways to beat you on offense than Michigan does. And if you're letting Michigan hit the explosive run and pass plays, I don't see how you're going to limit Georgia's. And so if Ohio State wins this game, they're going to do something they haven't done all season, which is flip that elite switch and beat a really, really good team and out physical them. And you're 41-27. I'm 41-20. I think Georgia wins this game by 3 scores. When Georgia has hit the elite button this season, they have looked unstoppable. So we'll see by the end of the year if that holds true, and that when Georgia hits the elite button, are they truly unstoppable? We're going to get a chance to see it. So, Daniel, those are our playoff predictions. We'll be back after the playoff games on Saturday night to recap, and then with a national championship preview next week before the big game. Be sure to follow us on social media at the Extra Point Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can follow him on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. That'll do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob.